Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the audiobook series here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and we are continuing Amyntas, the son of Persia, with chapter 14. Now, before we begin chapter 14, let's recap where we last left off last week. So, in the previous chapters, we have now seen Amyntas recover his memories from the time of the gathering. And in the process, he is now suffering a crisis of faith. With the memories of the past now in his, you could say, new body, he's conflicted of what he has to do. But, while there's also that, there's also the homecoming. His friends and family have believed he was dead for 6 years. He and Artaxerxes. And now they're back home. He doesn't know what to do. So let's see what our friend Amyntas is up to in chapter 14. Amyntas took a deep breath outside the temple and touched his forehead. Suddenly he felt dizzy and found a bench to sit on. Sitting, he closed his eyes and tried to calm his mind. Ever since he retrieved the sword, his recovered memories seemed to have left a burning sensation. "Would you like some water?" said a voice. Amyntas did not open his eyes to see who it was. "Yes, please." As the stranger handed him a water pouch, the Spartan guzzled the refreshing beverage and splashed a handful on his face. Feeling much better, he gave the pouch back. "Thank you," he kindly replied. "You're welcome, Amyntas." As the Spartan dried off his face, he was able to see who this stranger was. "Anahita?" asked Amyntas with surprise. He got off his bench and looked at her with wide eyes. She chuckled at her old friend. "I see you have not changed a bit," she teased. Amyntas could not even reply back. "Well, you certainly have," he managed to blurt out. Anahita had grown these past 6 years. Her hair had grown out and was put into a bun. She was taller and resembled more of an athlete who partook in the Olympic Games. As for her attire, she wore a hunter's outfit. She wore an all-black robe with straps of leather tied around both shoulders, and her arms were covered by long sleeves, adorned with metal braces. Around her waist was a belt made of animal furs with a small pouch on the right side. Leather boots, made by her mother, covered her feet. She looked like a regular soldier, but Amyntas could still see her beautiful face. "You grew a beard," she said. Amyntas stroked the hairs on his face. "Yeah, I may remove it," he replied. Anahita shook her head. "I think you should keep it. It adds to your handsome face." Amyntas was stunned. He had not heard a compliment like that before from her. "So, are you feeling better?" "I am. I'm feeling calm. Something I have not felt for a while," replied Amyntas. The two friends then spent the next few moments discussing all that had happened these past 6 years. "So I guess this is a shock for you to see me here," said Amyntas. "Indeed," said Anahita. Amyntas could sense her uneasiness. Just then, out of nowhere, she slapped him across the cheek. Amyntas was surprised by this. What the hell was that for?" he asked her. "That's for the 6 years of hell you put us through," said Anahita. "I was sold into slavery. I had no way of getting back home," yelled Amyntas. "I know," she yelled back. "I know." Her tone was soft. She let out a heavy sigh and locked eyes with him. "Amyntas, when we thought you were dead, we were all devastated. Your family, friends, me. When reports came to us of what had happened, the story we were told by the messengers, I laughed and cried. I knew you would go down fighting until the end. Your stubbornness was always the one thing I loved about you," she told him. Amyntas nearly choked on his words. "Love?" he repeated. Now he sounded like a child learning that his crush had feelings for him. She smiled. "Yes, you stupid fool. I've loved you ever since we were children. Growing up, I've always admired your character, even if you could be as stubborn as a bull." "Yeah, I tend to do that," said Amyntas. He chuckled a little bit. The two spent hours talking, and in the process, Amyntas felt a sensation come over him. This feeling, it was good, warmed his heart. Was this love? After a while, the two ended their conversation, with Anahita going to check on her traps. She asked Amyntas if he wanted to come and tag along, but he declined her offer, saying he had to meet someone. He got off the bench and noticed Protagoras in the distance. The philosopher sat on the steps of the city. He approached the man and took a seat next to him. "Greetings, Protagoras," said Amyntas. "Good day to you," replied the philosopher. "Can I ask you a question? You're knowledgeable about morality and relativity, said Amyntas. The Thracian smiled and turned to him. Indeed. What is your question? Inquired the man. Amyntas let out a sigh. Have you ever regretted a decision, good or bad? Every action we make has its pleasures and price, replied Protagoras. Why do you ask? Because I made a big decision. A long time ago. And in doing so, I changed some things. And now, I've fallen into the darkness and I believe I've failed. As Amyntas lamented his anguish, Protagoras chuckled. The Spartan turned to the Thracian man with a slight glare. Does my pain amuse you? Asked Amyntas. Not at all, my boy. Falling is not a failure. Failure comes when you stay where you have fallen, replied the Thracian. What are you afraid of? That I will make things worse? And the people I care for will pay the price? And you know this? Yes! Yelled Amyntas. The Spartan apologized for the outburst. Boy, the only true wisdom is in knowing it's relative. We believe something to be true based on our perspective and experiences. Do you understand? Somewhat. Protagoras, how did I stop feeling this way? Replied the Spartan. Tell me this. What is preventing you from moving forward? Amyntas reflected on his reconnected memories. My memories of the past? Answer me this. Are you any different from who you were back then? Amyntas could not answer that right away. Yes, he was indeed older and wiser, and he had the memories of his old wife, but he was still the same, regardless of these memories returning to him. In reality, his memories being brought back was another facet of his identity, but he was always the same Amyntas before all of this. No, he said, I'm still the same. I am the same Amyntas. Protagoras smiled. You see, my boy, you had the answer all along. You believed you were different based upon your past experiences, which you believed to be true. But remember, there is no such thing as absolute truth. After saying his piece, the Thracian left the Spartan to reflect. Alone in his thoughts, Amyntas was once again visited by the hooded stranger. Good words of wisdom, said the stranger. I know who you are now, replied Amyntas. Good. Now what are we going to do? Said the stranger. Amyntas turned to face the stranger, and for the first time, he saw the hooded man's face. It was his own, from his previous life, from the gathering. I'm going to free this world, said Amyntas with a hint of confidence. Why? Inquired his former self. Because I am Amyntas, the man who killed Kairos, who led his friends to victory, and I will do the same to this tyrant. My previous life may be gone, but my character is the same. I am Amyntas, son of Sparta and champion of the earth. He yelled into the sky. His former self smiled with satisfaction and slowly faded away. Amyntas was overjoyed. His confidence had returned to him. The Amyntas from the past was made whole. Having found faith in himself again, he returned to the temple with stride in his step. Everyone took notice of this. You're back, said Leonidas. Yes, my king. Better than before. And I think I know a way to beat Alexander and his army. He called everyone to the war room and explained his plan. Alexander's army is large, and knowing him, he'll follow the traditional rules of warfare with elite units on the right flank, weaker units toward the left, and cavalry in the reserve. We are going to change that. How so? Asked Themistocles. We need to make our elite phalanx much deeper, around 50 to 100 men deep, supported by the Persian infantry, and attack Alexander's elite phalanx, consisting of a defense of 8 men deep, head on. The rest of the army will be placed further back than the one on its left, said Amyntas. For that to work, the formation also has to be different, said Amonfredos. An echelon or diagonal formation might be the best bet against Alexander. It's unorthodox and not widely used, but it's a bold strategy if it works, said Pausanias. It will work, said Amyntas. He knew their limited forces could not withstand the impact of the Macedonian phalanx. Thus, they will remain in reserve until the elite Macedonian infantry was crushed on the left. It was a bold and risky plan. For it to work, Heraclius proposed Lucreta, which was the right location. It's near Plataea and has a vast plain surrounding the ancient city. It was as good as any place to launch an attack. Amyntas knew the region well. Its geography was similar to Plataea, and, if used correctly, could be used in their favor. What do you think? He asked everyone. Leonidas and the others knew they had very few options. The war was not in their favor, and sooner or later they would have to fight Alexander and his army. Leonidas slammed his hand on the table. It's decided. We march for Lucreta. Pausanias, make preparations for war. Today we take back our home, said Leonidas. The room erupted in applause and cheers. As Amyntas gripped his sword, he felt the strength he had back with Decimus and the others when they fought against Kairos. As he told himself before, he was a champion of the earth. With all the generals and elders making the necessary preparations, he pulled Iseridan aside. Iseridan, can you do me a favor? He asked. Of course, the Iberian replied. I need you to change my armor, said Amyntas. He handed the Iberian the armor and helmet he recovered from Thrace. He gave him a papyrus with specific instructions of the things he wanted changed. Iseridan took the stone tablet. I'll do my best, but you know I'm a blacksmith. I do not have enough experience working with armor. The Spartan told the Iberian to look for a Persian girl named Anahita. Her father was a fellow blacksmith, but he also specialized in armor construction and reconstruction. The Iberian nodded his head and went to look for the girl. Themistocles stood beside Amyntas and whispered in his ear, If we lose this, all is lost, said the Athenian. Amyntas smirked. Emphasis on the word if. Chapter 15. Later that day, all in Sparta heard the call for war. Every man gathered their armor and met the king to be briefed upon the coming conflict. Amyntas and the prince left the temple and debated their action after Alexander. Once we defeat him, we need to prepare an invasion for Persia and we take Babylon. Said Artaxerxes, we cannot afford to take the entire army to Persia, my prince. Remember, there is still that rumored Carthaginian invading force lingering around. We wait until our flanks are secured in Greece, advised Amyntas. Artaxerxes had utterly forgotten about the invasion from Carthage. Bringing that wonder weapon with us will be a good idea. It may come in handy. And I suppose you want me clear from the danger, said the prince. Amyntas looked at his friend and shook his head. Follow me. Artaxerxes, using his staff, followed his bodyguard. Where are we going? To the arena. I'm going to teach you one final lesson. Artaxerxes smiled and followed him to the training field. When they arrived, they were greeted by a handful of Spartans, little younger than Amyntas. Amyntas explained that he needed 5 strong, fast, and cunning Spartans to help him with this final lesson. After he finished, 5 recruits of varying ages stepped forward. He then told these Spartans to form a ring around the prince. Amyntas, what's going on? Asked the prince. The blind Persian youth was hit in the back of the head from behind. He turned around and got hit again, this time in the chest. The blow forced him to the ground, gasping for air. Getting up, he got into a defensive stance. When he got hit another time, he swung his staff wildly and missed his target. Same thing happened again, over and over. The Spartan showed no mercy to the former prince. He was punched in the face, stomach, back, ribs, all over. The irritation soon took hold of the prince, and his emotions began to take over. Concentrate, your highness. Listen for them, he said. I'm trying, shouted the prince. However, his emotions were taking over him. They were taking control of him. And soon, he attacked without thought, completely missing. Suddenly, one Spartan ran at the prince, delivering a devastating punch to the boy's face. The blow knocked him to the ground again, but this time, forcing him to drop the staff. Falling on his back, the blind youth began to tear up. Amyntas stopped the Spartan for a moment. Get up, he said. I can't, sobbed the prince. I'm blind. Your blindness does not define you, your grace. I have seen you fight, struggle, and persevere in Carthage. I know the man you are. Now, I need you to say it. Artaxerxes slowly grabbed the staff and helped prop himself back to his feet. Tears were still in his eyes, as was blood. Now, who are you? Amyntas asked. I'm Artaxerxes. He got hit by another Spartan. The Persian youth stumbled, but remained footed. Wrong. Who are you? I'm the Prince of Persia, said Artaxerxes. Again, shouted Amyntas. I'm the Prince of Persia. Again, shouted Amyntas. I am the Prince of Persia. Amyntas could hear the confidence in his voice. Again, he repeated. I am the Prince of Persia, yelled Artaxerxes. Again, shouted Amyntas. I'm the Prince of Persia, shouted Artaxerxes at the top of his lungs. Yes, you are. Now fight. Listen for everything. Taking several deep breaths, Artaxerxes calmed himself, centering, and listened. He focused on every little sound. He could see everything from the gentle winds to the songs of the birds. He could see once more. With a nod, Amyntas told the Spartans to rerun the drill. One Spartan charged, said Artaxerxes again, but this time the prince was ready. When the Spartan made the first step, Artaxerxes felt the earth's vibration and knew where to strike. Before the Spartan could connect his punch, Artaxerxes jabbed the bottom of the staff into the attacker's stomach behind him. Then he turned around and struck the Spartan with the eagle's head. Keeping momentum, he swung his weapon to his left, cracking the next Spartan across the jaw. He heard the Spartan shift his footing in the sand to his right. Dodging a punch, the prince counters with an elbow to the face, followed by a strike to the opponent's neck with the staff's bottom end. And the Spartan clutched his throat. Artaxerxes kicked the attacker away. With 3 of the 5 Spartans dealt with, all that remained were the 2 behind him. Turning around, he strolled towards his attackers, both eager to strike a blind man. The 2 Spartans then attacked together, planning to take the youth by surprise. At first it seemed the Persian youth looked doomed, but following the pattern of their attacks, he deduced their next set of moves. Using the eagle's head on the staff, he hooked the Spartan's leg and tripped him. As for the other, he one kick at the Spartan's knees forced him to fall, causing him extreme amount of pain. Finally, sending over the last Spartan, Artaxerxes raised the staff over his head. In one mighty swing, he struck his target, but purposely missed his head at the last minute. Panting heavily, the Prince of Persia planted the staff firmly in the ground and helped the Spartan to his feet. Satisfied, Amyntas declared the session officially over. As for the 2 Spartans, they left, helping their other friends. While they attended to the other 3, Amyntas approached the prince and smiled. Congratulations, your highness. You have just learned your final lesson. What, fighting Spartans blind while taking a beating? Asked the prince. No, believing in yourself. Artaxerxes smiled and shook his friend's hand. Just then, Mardonius arrived in the area. He was stunned to see the prince battered and bloody. I am all right, Mardonius. It's all taken care of. Did you need something? King Leonidas has informed us that a messenger from Alexander has arrived. They wait for us at Mount Taygetus. Handing the prince a cloth, the 2 cleaned up and followed Mardonius. Their journey took them to a small village on the mountain slopes. Amyntas saw Themistocles, his father, Heraclius, and the others outside the village. Where's the king? He asked. He's inside the village discussing with the messenger, replied his father. I'm going in, said Amyntas, pushing past the others. Son, wait, said his father, but Amyntas was already inside. Seeing his king, he made his way towards the meeting. 2 of Leonidas' guards stopped him. You cannot enter, said one of the guards. Amyntas ignored them and continued his way inside. Entering the meeting, he greeted his king and the Macedonian ambassador. Amyntas, what are you doing here? Forgive me, my king. I hope I am not intruding, but I heard we were having guests from the north. King Leonidas, my lord Alexander has been very reasonable. All he wants is to unite Greece, despite your past transgressions. Is that so wrong? Said the Macedonian ambassador. I will never submit to a person like Alexander, said Leonidas. Now, my lord, the ambassador has a valid point, and united Greece does sound promising, said Amyntas. Leonidas looked at the young man in bewilderment, while the ambassador smiled. I am glad someone here understands the reason, said the ambassador. If my king's being unreasonable, perhaps we can discuss the matter, said Amyntas. A splendid idea. Amyntas gestured to the ambassador to walk with him. One of the guards glared at the young Spartan. That traitor! Seethed the Spartan. Leonidas held his guards back and told him to stand down. Let's see how this plays out, said Leonidas. As the 2 men walked through the city, they discussed Alexander's terms. While the ambassador thought he had found a man he could reason and manipulate, Amyntas used the ambassador to learn more about Alexander and, of course, Artabanus. Tell me, Macedonian, what is it your king truly seeks? Order, purpose, direction, peace, no more than that. He wants to have this land united under one king, under one idea. Security. So you would have security in place of freedom. The ambassador chuckled. The people never have been truly free. Nor have they ever had freedom. Only the illusion of it. And here is the real secret. They don't want it. The responsibility is too great to bear. It's why they are so quick to fall in line when someone else takes charge. That's what they want to be told what to do. They yearn for it. Understandable, since all mankind was built to serve. Do others in the Persian court feel the same way? Amyntas was baiting the ambassador, hoping for him to talk more. Unknowingly taking the bait, the ambassador named the other co-conspirators. Oh yes, the guild, the Libyan prince Inaros III, and Amyntas of Sais agreed. It would be best if you met with them when this is all over, smiled the ambassador. Indeed, thought Amyntas. They arrived at the pit in the city center. As they walked, criminals and traitors were thrown down the hole and left to die. So, Spartan, what do you think of my king's goals? Amyntas had to play his part well. Or rather, Amyntas had played his part well. Now, he had to sell it. He could not afford to show the ambassador his true nature. At least, not yet. Well, your king's goals seem reasonable. May I ask one final question? In exchange for this security, what does Sparta have to give up? All my king asks is that you recognize his authority and kneel before him, said the ambassador. Bend the knee. Amyntas bit his lip. Yeah, that's gonna be a problem. We Spartans don't bend the knee to anybody. But you bent the knee to Xerxes at Thermopylae. Is that not true? The Macedonian quipped. Yes, but there's a little more to that. You see, he earned our respect. That's why my king kneeled before him. I can't say the same for Alexander. The Macedonian became irritated. Understand this, Spartan. If you fail to recognize your superiors, your homes will be burned. Consider the fate of your women. Amyntas chuckled. You don't know our women. Amyntas replied. The ambassador then grabbed his shirt and threatened him. Choose your next words carefully, boy. They may be your last. Amyntas then dropped his axe and sheathed his sword with blinding speed, taking the Macedonian by surprise. For an ambassador, you've forgotten one important rule in Sparta. Everyone, even the king's messenger, is held accountable for his words. The Macedonian stumbled over his sentences upon realizing his mistake. I'm so sorry. I meant no. Amyntas pointed his sword at the man's throat and spoke with the heart of a lion. You insult my king. You threaten my people with slavery and would have us sapped of all life. I have chosen my words carefully. Macedonian, perhaps you should have thought harder on yours. As the Macedonian slowly moved back, he realized he was nearing the pit. Wait! If you kill me, there will be war. Do you want that? No man kills a king's messenger. Amyntas smiled. He didn't care. I hope you burn in Tartarus, said the ambassador. I will. Save me a seat, said Amyntas. Before the man could react, Amyntas kicked the Macedonian into the pit, hearing the poor fool scream all the way down to the abyss. Well, Amyntas, you got yourself a war, he said to himself. Chapter 16. You did what? Shouted Themistocles. After ending negotiations with the Macedonian ambassador, Amyntas gathered up his friends to tell him what he had learned. I don't know what you're complaining about. That Latonic phrase was perfect, said Platarchus. I agree. Save me a seat? Pure comedy, added Pausanias. Back to the matter at hand. Are you sure those are the names the ambassador gave you? Asked the prince. Yes, my lord. Do you know of them? Replied Amyntas. I've heard their names mentioned in my father's court many years ago. Now it seems that these former enemies are now allies with Artabanus, said Artaxerxes. Back to the matter at hand, Amyntas said it was time to prepare the army for war. Heraclius said he would write a message to Alexander. As the scholar did this, Leonidas, Pausanias, Amalphaeus, and Platarchus, and Nicholas gathered all the remaining Spartans, while Mardonius gathered the remaining Persian loyalists. Amyntas knew there was no going back from this. Tomorrow, we march for war, said Amyntas. As the company returned down the mountain, Amyntas pulled Anahita, wishing to speak with her privately. What is it, Amyntas? She asked. Amyntas sat near the mountain's ledge, overlooking Sparta and the valley below. He held her hands in his and spoke softly. Anahita, this path we all We are all on. It leads only in one direction. Glory or death. Growing up, I dreamed of a good death. Now I long for a good life. Anahita's expression changed. She had never seen this side of him before. Amyntas, what are you saying? They say you can know a person through 1 hour of conversation than a year. He turned and locked eyes with her. Anahita, I'd have been away for so long, and I know my passing has caused you great pain. When we spoke, not too long ago, I could see the pain in your face. You tried to hide it. Anahita allowed a few tears to fall down her cheeks. She cleared her throat before responding. I mourned you, Amyntas. When they said you died, I felt my heart break inside me. I tried to move on these past 6 years, and for a while I did. But then I saw you in the temple, outside, alive. I was happy, but angry and hurt at the same time. It's not your fault, but I could not go through that again. Through her tears, she chuckled and remembered a memory from her youth. From their childhood youth. Do you remember when I first came to Sparta? Amyntas smiled in remembrance. How could I forget? It was 3 years after the Battle of Marathon. Persian sentiment was not very high. She playfully pushed him at the joke. I remember my family settling shop just outside the city. I was going and getting supplies, and I knew the risk if I went inside, but I could not help but marvel at the city's beauty, its people, and its culture. I bought the supplies and returned home, unaware that 5 Spartan boys were following me. I remember them, those arrogant bastards. I was returning from my time in the mountains when I saw you. At first, I thought these boys would prove themselves, but then I saw what would happen. My fight with the bear still fueled me. I charged at them. Anahita laughed. My savior, the little bear. After that day, I had this dream that you and I... Amyntas put a finger to her lips, stopping her. I've had the same dream, and now it's within reach. I'm not about to let you go, he said softly. Amyntas, replied Anahita softly. Anahita, will you be my wife? He asked. The Persian woman stared at him. Then, before uttering a word, she wrapped her arms around him, allowing tears to flow freely. Yes, my husband, she whispered in his ear. After the embrace, the two shared a loving kiss, and the sun set behind them. The next day, the Spartan-Persian alliance was amassed outside the city gates. However, they did not march to Lucreta. They were waiting for 2 more people. Amyntas and Artaxerxes were at Iseridan's shop, getting fitted. He told them they created new armor with his wife and the other smiths. Both men went to different changing rooms to try on their new armor. After a few minutes, Artaxerxes was the first one to step out. My boy, you look like a son of Persia. The Persian prince wore a purple robe with white pants. Protecting his chest was a armor mixture of leather, iron, and bronze scales, reminiscing the past immortals. On his left side was a double-edged sword, while on his right was a Persian axe called a sageris. He wielded a 6-foot spear with a distinct broad iron-leaf shaped spearhead in his right hand. On the spear's opposite end was a round bronze counterweight, and, like the Persians before him, his face was covered by a loose felt cap called a tiara that, when pulled, protects his face from the wind or dust. I wish you could see how powerful you look, your grace, said the Iseridan. The Persian smiled and then waved a hand. I do not need sight to judge the quality of your work. I know you place your heart into this piece. Just as she finished talking, Amyntas stepped out wearing his armor. Gasps filled the room. By the gods, said the Iberian. Like his time during the gathering, Amyntas was a walking god. He wore his musculated cuirass, the same he had worn before on the attack at Castle Olympus. In truth, his armor had remained very much the same, except with one distinct feature. Instead of his traditional Corinth helmet with a motif from before, Iseridan reshaped the helmet to resemble a male lion's face, complete with realistic features and detail, including ears. As for the hairpiece, a lush lion's mane of red horsehair. covered the top. With his shield in hand, Amyntas looked fiercer than ever. Amyntas turned to look at the prince. "You look like the son of an eagle, your grace. And from the sounds of the others, you resemble the son of a lion." They went outside the city with both men fully dressed and ready for battle. Amyntas found his horse at the helm of the army. The king would lead his forces in other circumstances, but not today. Today, Sparta does not solely follow their king. They followed him. He turned and looked at the men that had assembled. "I hope you ate heartily today, men. Today, we feast in hell," he shouted. As he finished, a roar of hurrah filled the morning air. Unsheathing his sword, he commanded the army to march toward Lucreta. Lucreta, 473 BC. At the Boeotian plains, both armies arrived to meet each other. On one side was Amyntas and his army, and the other was the Macedonians. And as each side made camp, a Spartan lookout reported that a lone soldier was approaching their base. "Perhaps they wish to surrender?" asked one Persian. Amyntas shook his head. "No, Alexander would not miss a fight like this." Grabbing his horse with Themistocles, Mardonius and Artaxerxes, and Leonidas, they rode out to meet their enemy. Both parties met in the center of the field. Amyntas soon realized that this would be the first time meeting Alexander the First. With both sides in attendance, the Macedonian king spoke. "Good king, you have my compliments. Despite your arrogance and refusal to accept change, I admire your people's bravery and staunch resistance. Despite being a thorn in my side for 6 years, I am prepared to forgive all. You fight for your lands? Keep them. Sparta was more prosperous than before the reign of Xerxes. I will make sure you are my right hand, my champion. Everything you fought for will be achieved if you order your men to stand down and surrender." After he finished, King Leonidas removed his helmet and responded. "I appreciate the sentiment, Macedonian. However, you are mistaken. I do not lead this army. He does." Leonidas pointed to Amyntas. Alexander turned his attention to the young Spartan, snickering. "So this is the Spartan youth I have been told about. You're not what I expected," said Alexander. "Well, you are everything I expected you to be, lover of the Greeks," said Amyntas. "Let me ask you something. What did Artabanus promise you that was tempting enough to kill your own people? You won't tell me you killed all of them for united Greece, are you?" The Spartan's words stung the Macedonian king. Alexander let out a huff. "Some of us still believe in that dream," replied the Macedonian. "Sorry, I don't see patriotism here. All I see is a madman, a tyrant latched onto an excuse to kill people, and who is so stupid he doesn't realize he's being used as a puppet." Alexander loosened an arrow in anger. The arrow whipped past Amyntas' head. Seething with rage, he glared menacingly at his foe and cursed at him in Greek. "I will remove that armor from your rotting corpse." Amyntas was not worried. Instead, he responded in Greek, "Come and take him." Furious, the Macedonian left the field and returned to camp. "Well, I assume this ends negotiations," replied Themistocles sarcastically. "Get everyone ready. It's about to begin." Each commander was ordered to form ranks once both sides returned to camp. Alexander ordered his elite units to form on the right side, 8 men deep, just as Amyntas expected. The Persians comprised the rest of the left, and the Carthaginian cavalry waited in reserve. Amyntas ordered the heavy Spartan and Persian infantry to form an extra deep phalanx, with Pausanias and the rest of the Spartan commanders leading the charge. Next, he positioned Mardonius and Anahita with the cavalry and Themistocles with the Persian light infantry. Organized in a diagonal formation, he prayed to the gods for this plan to work. As for the Macedonian, one of the king's guard noticed the bizarre formation. "My lord, it seems our enemies are using a rather unusual formation," said the soldier. Alexander did not care. "They are scared, thus they will use any attempt to defeat us. It won't work." He then called over his North African cavalry commander. "If the battle appears to be going poorly, you know what to do," said the Macedonian. The Carthaginian nodded his head. With a wave, Alexander ordered his Persian forces to envelop the right flank. With a hurrah, the Persians charged at their enemies. On the other side of the field, Themistocles and his forces got into formation. Not too far from them were Mardonius and Anahita, who were also with the rest of the cavalry. "Steady, men! Steady!" said the Athenian commander. It had been many years since he had led troops into battle. He was rusty, but not done yet. He heard the thunderous sound of charging soldiers approaching his small division. He wanted to counterattack, but not yet. He had to follow Amyntas' orders to the letter. Then, just before the Persians made it halfway across the field to their side, Amyntas launched the first wave of his attack. "Now!" shouted Macedonians. He and Amyntas' cavalry unit engaged the oncoming Persians. Their attack was sudden and savage. Amyntas and her archers rained down fire, while Macedonians and his lancers skewered the enemy by the dozen. Despite having one arm, he was still a ferocious soldier, just as he was at Plataea. Their attacks caused chaos in the Persian unit and disrupted their attempt to bring Themistocles' men into battle. Speaking of which, seeing the fighting turn in their favor, Themistocles already charged to assist the cavalry. He and his men rushed into the fray, causing more chaos for their enemies. Despite living in exile, Themistocles proved he was still a force to be reckoned with. With a swing of his sword, he lopped limbs left and right. To the aging Athenian commander, the new Persian forces fought the same way as the old, and died just the same. Taking a moment to recover, he thrust his sword into the air and shouted at the top of his lungs so all could hear, "For Athena! For Athens! For glory!" "How's the situation on the right flank?" asked Amyntas. "Excellent. Macedonians and his cavalry routed the enemies in advance, with Themistocles' forces aiding them." "So far your plan is working, son," said Nicholas. With their flanks secured, Amyntas gathered up the bulk of their forces. Before he could accompany the others, he pulled Artaxerxes aside. "Take a small division of men and place yourself next to the phalanx. Once the attack commences, if we cannot break through, flank around and attack their rear." "And the king?" asked Artaxerxes. Amyntas slapped the prince on the shoulder. "Whoever gets to him first," replied Amyntas, chuckling. The prince gathered his men and followed Amyntas to the front lines. He then pulled Starchus aside and whispered in his ear. "Go with him," he said. The young Spartan nodded his head and went to join the prince. Back over with the Macedonians, Alexander was furious. Grabbing his spear and shield, he marched toward the head of the elite guard. "If you want something done right, do it yourself," he said under his breath. Placing himself in the first line of defense, he raised his men's courage through his speech. "Fear not, men! We shall prevail this day, for I am with you. I have conquered every enemy that has dared to stand against us. Today we have the honor of witnessing the end of the mighty Spartans. Their king's head will be paraded on a spear throughout our city by me, your king, your savior, your god." The ranks clamored their shields and chanted their king's name. "Alexander! Alexander! Alexander!" Across the field, Amyntas and the Spartans heard the morale speech, with Nicholas raising an eyebrow. "Someone likes to stroke their ego," said Amonfredos. "Shall we apply with one of our own?" replied Amyntas. "Gladly." Leonidas, the aging Spartan king, turned to face his soldiers. "This is it, men. This is the day we were promised. This is the day they die. Earn these shields, men!" shouted Nicholas. "Remember, a brave man takes death once, a coward 1,000 times over," yelled Pausanias. The Spartans let out a thunderous "Ahoo!" that shook the very ground. Clutching his spear, Amyntas told his men to be ready. Unsheathing his sword, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Forward!" The massive 100-men deep phalanx advanced toward the Macedonian foes. The earth-shattering footsteps rippled through the ground. While Alexander had vast power, Spartans had their fighting ability, and today the Macedonian would experience that firsthand. Upon the first contact, the Spartan super phalanx smashed into the Macedonian right and drove it back. Alexander severely underestimated his foe, and his men were paying the price. Faced with a wall of bronze and muscle, the Macedonians suffered many casualties in the engagement. Fallen men were trampled to death or killed by spear butts in the ensuing melee. While Amyntas and his forces attacked in the front, Artaxerxes and his smaller division wheeled around and attacked the rear. Soon the battle transformed to a slaughter. Shields, helmets, swords, and spears became red with blood. Slowly the Macedonians began to lose the ground until all sides surrounded them. Eventually the Spartans and the Persians slowly enveloped their foes like a red wave, engulfing all in its path and turning it into a true killing field. After 3 hours of blood, sweat, and tears, Amyntas and his forces defeated the Macedonians. The once grassy plains were stained with blood. The hot afternoon sun toasted the dead soldiers on the battlefield, attracting flies. None remained, save for one. Bound and powerless, Alexander was brought before Amyntas and his allies. The former king of Macedonia did not look at his enemies. "It's over, Alexander." "You lost," said the prince. Suddenly, Alexander began to chuckle. His chuckle then turned into a small laugh. filling the atmosphere with confusion and uncertainty. Amyntas raised the king's face with his sword tip. "Do you find your death amusing?" he asked. Alexander looked at him. Blood splattered all over his face. "No, but I find your demise comedic. To come so close and yet so far." Amyntas grabbed the man's face. "Enough riddles. Speak sense," he ordered. "It doesn't matter. You've already lost." Suddenly 2 of Macedonians' cavalry ran to Amyntas with urgency. "Amyntas, grave news. The Numidian cavalry, they're gone." "What?" said everyone in unison. Just then Alexander began to laugh again. "How does it feel, Amyntas? How does it taste? Sweet? Soon your blood will taste even more sweeter." And before the Macedonian could utter another word, Amyntas severed the man's head from his body with one clean strike. His head rolled gently to one side while his helpless corpse fell, twitching a little bit. With him dead, Amyntas turned his attention to the soldiers. Did anyone see where they went? "No. They simply vanished," said one Persian. "I think they went west," replied the other. "West? Why would they go west?" "Amyntas, you need to see this." Mardonius handed the Spartan a bloody note found inside Alexander's robes. As he read the inscription, his eyes widened upon realization. "By the gods, they're here," he said. "Who's here?" Leonidas asked. Amyntas handed the king the note. Upon reading the message, the king explained to the others that it was Alexander's last order. He sent Carthaginian cavalry west to meet up with the rest of the invasion force of Leonidas. "Where will they land?" asked Nicholas. "There's only one place where an invasion force like that could land," said Artaxerxes. "Marathon," finished Mr. Cleese. "How far are we from there?" asked Amyntas. 7 hours. Putting his sword away, Amyntas told everyone to gather up the army and prepare for a quick march. This day was far, far from over. And with that, viewers and listeners, we will stop here for today. Now, I am so excited that we're now getting to the best part of the book. Now we're getting to the climax. But we'll stop here to resume next week. I hope you enjoyed Amyntas' story. I know I have. And if you want to read a copy of Amyntas or The Gathering, I am doing a holiday sale. Go to my previous video to check on the code to use for your ebooks. It's 50% off from now until the end of December. Well, thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful rest of your evenings wherever you are in the world. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.